Hello and welcome, and this, as you might have guessed if you're doing your maths all right, is part 3 of the Marque's Mantula trilogy. We've done the other 2, let's find out about this one. We've got 2 really nice Marque's Mantulas. Tell us how you came to get a third.
Well, we say 2 really nice. The first one we got was getting advisories on the MOT at that point in time for the chassis, and it was only a matter of time before we had to do something significant with it. So we started planning for that project. But a rather drunk night on Facebook, we heard about a Mantula that was being offered for sale. And it seemed like a good idea at the time that we could collect another car for parts. We negotiated and paid what we thought was a very good price for the car. It was literally a case of it was in pieces. There were sections of chassis missing, completely rusted away. All the axle, engine and gearbox were out of the car. Before we picked it up, the guy literally just poked the bolts through the basic suspension links just so we could have the chassis as a rolling chassis, shall we say, to be able to collect all the parts together, to be able to trailer them back. But it was literally...
The interior was horrible.
Oh, the interior, gross. Where that had been, it'd been stored in a lockup for 8 years around Manchester.
It was ready to form an independent state. It was starting to run off on its own.
Yeah, things were living in it, that's for sure. So it was really a case of, it was bought to be a parts bin. But once we got it back, it was a whole car. It had a complete identity. And once we got it back and back in the garage, you sit there, as you do, with a glass of wine, or 2, or 3, and it just seemed then a better and better idea that the cars are so rare that not to put a car back on the road when you could would have seemed a pity. I mean, we know from the events we go to with the cars just how rare these cars are getting now. All 3 of these cars are Q-plated cars. They were all sold from the factory as kits, and that's quite rare in itself, because most of the cars from the factory actually were sold as complete cars. They originally set up exactly the same way as Lotus and TVR did from the early days, and they basically sold complete cars, and they tried to get round, I think all of them got around the the new vehicle purchase tax in the early days by selling them as what they would call, I think, component cars. I think was the technical was the technical term for it, to get around the new car purchase tax. So you had to fit certain bits. But in the 80s, Marque's were looking for a different way to make the cars, and so they sold some as kits, and we're lucky enough to have 3 of those. They're all Q-plate, but I find that gives us a little bit of leeway, if you like, with how we develop the cars moving forward. So it seemed a shame to scrap it. So yeah, after quite a bite of wine, it seemed a good idea to go for it. And that was about 2014, I think, wasn't it? I think somewhere about there. I think we looked at doing it, and basically it was a lot of chassis work, an enormous amount of chassis work. The car, I love these cars because they are just so straightforward to work on. The chassis is 1.5-inch box section tube, 16 gauge. You can get it from any steel stockist, and you can just get on there and do it yourself. And that theme really then moved forward with having the confidence of having done one car, really started to apply that to this second car. And so we wanted to put the jack axle in, and basically the way I sold this third car to Jan was it would be her car.
So he did a very smooth manoeuvre and said, right, okay, give me a mood board of what you really want for this car, you see? So it's kind of...
That's clever.
That's clever, isn't
That's
it? Yes,
clever.
you know, kind of like we can sell that as strategy, really.
So what was on the mood board?
Well, do you want to go for this one?
Well, there was aircon, for one. An automatic gearbox would have been nice. Various styling tweaks from a Pantera, a GT40. What else was there? Lancia Stratos, I think.
Yes, yeah. I mean, basically, I was looking for the large black wheel, nice low white car look, and one of the Panteras did that particularly well. So we.
And the engine choice?
Well, yes. I mean, because from the history of Marcos with using so many different engines, we thought, well, that's gives us quite a bit of flexibility, if you like, for what engine we could choose to put in. Obviously, we did get a Rover V8 with it, but it was obviously, having sat around for 8 years in a damp environment, it was seat solid, so it was going to cost a lot of money to do that engine. And also, I suppose something must have just tweaked in my brain somewhere about Spider Engineering and how they'd gone about doing a Lotus with a modern Zetec and Duratec engine. And the opportunity came about, again, a friend had an S-type Jaguar. The 2000, I think it ran from 2000, about 2005 or 2007, the Jaguar S-type, had a 3-litre V6 in it. Oh, that's fortunate, isn't it? It's a 3-litre V6, I thought. Sounds about right, a modern engine. So you get reasonable power, better economy, and we wanted the car to be something more practical that we could use for longer touring events on Europe. We've been to Le Mans before, but obviously having that more a vehicle more flexible for range on fueling would be very, very useful. And also, obviously, with the aircon request, it was going to be a lot better for travelling in hotter environments. So that really then kind of scaled in the project, if you like. Obviously, we were going to use the Jaguar back axle again, managed to find an XJS one, and with the 3-litre V6 engine, did all the measurements. It was very close. The engine bay designed to take a Rover V8, obviously, but very tight. But the good thing is with the that 3-litre V6, it's being a modern Duratec, it's quad cam. The spark plugs are in the centre of the heads. A lot easier to get to than the old Rover V8s, which were you had to get your hand down by the shaft. Terrible to get to. So it was quite useful. It's obviously a shorter engine than the V8, so it seemed like it would fit very nicely. With forward bracketing, obviously not being that dissimilar from the earlier Marques's, everything seemed to be possible. And it was a case then of making that happen. So obviously there was a lot of chassis work then, with just repairing the chassis, putting the strength into it, and putting a bit more strength into it as well with fillets to actually take the power of the Jaguar engine. Because I think in a Jaguar, I think they start at about 240 horsepower. I'd heard about the engine being used in other cars. I think a couple of people have put them into MX-5s as a very nice, powerful alternative.